Want to find a way to give back this holiday season, but not sure how? Go to GoFundMe.com right now and start a GoFundMe. It's easy. Instead of wasting time and money on gifts that nobody wants or needs, help your friends and family give back and give to something good, something meaningful. You can start a GoFundMe today in just minutes. Fundraise for a friend or family member, a cause, or an organization. Help out the local animal shelter. Get that little lending library up and running. Just make your world a better place. GoFundMe is the trusted place to fundraise for what you care about. With no pressure to hit your fundraising goal, but tons of tools to help you reach it, you can confidently start fundraising right now. 'Tis the season for giving back, and giving feels good. Start your GoFundMe today at GoFundMe.com. That's GoFundMe.com. GoFundMe.com. This is a commercial message brought to you by GoFundMe.
Welcome to IndoctriNation, a weekly conversation series about protecting yourself from systems of control. I'm your host, Rachel Bernstein.
Hello, everyone. I just checked the podcast's latest rankings, and IndoctriNation is officially number one on FeedSpot's 15 best indoctrination podcasts to listen to in 2025. That means indoctrination about really any subject and in any context. So we're very proud of that here. We're also listed as number 8 in their top 10 cult podcast list. And it is so nice to be recognized. It is so lovely that we are thought of in that way and in that light. If our conversations have meant something to you, please take a moment to rate and review the show wherever you listen to it. It truly helps people like you to find the show and keeps these important discussions going. Today on the show, we have Sarma Melngailis, and she is here to discuss her journey from running a successful New York-based, plant-based restaurant to being in a highly publicized scandal. Sarma shares her personal experiences of manipulation and betrayal by a coercive partner, and she reflects on her story and how she was misinterpreted, misrepresented in the Netflix docuseries in so many ways. The Netflix docuseries was called Bad Vegan, so already you could tell it's a sensationalistic title. She opens up about the challenges of reclaiming her narrative, her own narrative, through her memoir, which provides deeper insights into her experiences, and it serves as a cautionary tale and also, hopefully, a source of solace to others. Sarma also explores the psychological tactics used by her abuser and the subsequent betrayal by the media, and the importance of sharing her story, the one that she got to write, to help others understand and navigate similar situations. The discussion delves into the emotional and psychological and physiological aftermath of such traumatic events and the path towards healing and greater awareness. Here is Sarma now. It is my pleasure to have Sarma Melngailis with me today. I am so happy to be able to talk to you, and I know that a lot of people who are listening have heard your story, and I certainly want them to be checking out your book and wherever else your story is out there. And I think it is actually quite amazing that you've been able to use your experience as a cautionary tale, as a way to really help people see what they need to see in these kinds of situations. And so I would love for you to take a moment to introduce yourself, and then we'll start talking.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for having me. My story revolves around, I had a sort of a big life in New York, and I had a business and a restaurant and a brand that was growing, and it was, it was a plant-based restaurant. It got a lot of attention in the press, celebrities came, all that. I had a very big life from the outside, and then somebody came into it, and it was a situation that now looking back at it, I understand it was very much being in a cult of one, and it all got taken down in this fiery kind of, I mean, not literally fiery, but it all unraveled over years, and I, lost it all and then some, and other people were harmed, which of course is the worst part because then it feels like it's my fault. And then I was also blamed and incarcerated. And then there was a docuseries, air quotes, docuseries made on Netflix called Bad Vegan, which also didn't tell the story correctly. And then that felt like a betrayal. And then I've recently put out a memoir about my experience, which people who've seen the show and read the book said it's, it's very different and there's so much more in the memoir. And it's very helpful, I think, for people who've been through this to read somebody else's account of it. And then also, I really hope that it does serve as a cautionary tale to anybody who maybe hasn't been through it and wouldn't necessarily know what to look for, and or maybe somebody reads it and recognizes that something like this is happening to a friend or a loved one or a sibling or something. Either way, I just want it to be helpful. And on top of that, it's, for better or worse, there's all kinds of sort of interesting, salacious details and things that make it entertaining from like a sort of a public media perspective. And that's fine too, as long as my story is useful at the same time.
Right. And so I know we're going to be highlighting the lesser salacious parts of it, the parts that are more important, I think. And I have worked hard on this podcast to not be sensationalistic, to tell the other parts, the things that were important leading up to those moments and the things that were important after those moments, the bookends of the story, without the book in between sometimes, because that's something, you can offer, to people in the media, et cetera, and they will like eat that up. I'm curious if you feel comfortable talking a little bit about what you think Netflix or just media kind of got wrong with your story, just to clarify those things before we move on, because I think some people have seen the show and they'd be very curious to know what really represented you well, but also what didn't.
First of all, the media initially, it was this tabloid story, and so they're getting the headlines and everything all wrong, but and they're only seeing it from one angle. The show that ended up on Netflix, I thought they were going to tell an accurate story and also explore the psychology of it. They spent a whole day interviewing Evan Stark, who like literally wrote the book on coercive control and understands these things. And then they didn't use any of it. There was nothing in the show that explained how this happened. So that was sort of an overall criticism. But then there were things that they left out in the way that they edited things that made, that also prevented people from understanding what really happened or from allowing. I mean, I can see now, looking back, the way that it was crafted together was done so that you could watch the show and either, depending on your own lived experience, you either watch the show and feel very sympathetic and think, oh my God, look what happened or what she went through. Or you watch the show, you don't really understand what's going on. And then there's this ending that was very misleading where people go, oh, she was in on it the whole time. And so then half the people think I'm a horrible human being and I'm a con artist too, and I deserve to be locked up in jail, which is what a lot of the feedback I got afterwards, which was painful. And it was a betrayal by the filmmakers and who profited enormously from it. And I didn't. I got my employees paid for my participation, which is what I wanted. And they were supposed to include that and they didn't. So I've gone through it in much detail in other places and I wrote about it on my website, but they even moved my words around so that I'm responding, and they had me do a phone call with him so that we would have more material for the show, but then used it to make it look like I'm laughing with him about everything that happened. It's funny because when it first came out, I was just in shock and confused, but the more and more time that has gone by, the more I just see it for what it is, this deliberate, gross betrayal. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people in that world of entertainment and Hollywood, and I wouldn't have even said before that a quote documentary is part of the world of course, it's entertainment, but they're meant to be, I think historically documentaries are telling a true story and there's sort of an obligation to tell a true story. Otherwise, it's not a documentary. But in fact, they're just making entertainment and using somebody's real life story. And I think those people can, I don't know, they'll karma. I don't know.
Yeah. Right. Right. So that's okay. Right. I have so many reactions to that. It's reminding me years ago, I was asked to be quoted in a New York Times article that was about Nexium, about the women of Nexium, even though there were men in it too, but they were covering the women in Nexium, some of whom were involved in this sort of inner circle that was about, being sexual, really, predation over them. But a lot of people were in Nexium and were taking courses about how to improve their businesses. They knew nothing about and didn't have anything to do with anything else. But it became known as the sex cult. Same thing with a lot of other groups where that's a part of the story. It's a small part of the story, but it becomes this overlay, this sort of umbrella.
That's
right?
what people know it as.
Right.
Wasn't that sex cult? Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I remember saying to the reporter who was wanting to quote me, tell me a little bit about the story. Well, it's going to be called The Sex Cult of Upstate New York or whatever. And I said, okay, I am happy to be quoted if you change the title.
Yeah.
And they said no. So I said, oh, no. Like that became easy. Like, I'm not going to participate in something that where everyone then is going to have to dig themselves out of a hole that you dug for them, where they mention what group they were in, and people will automatically say, oh, the sex cult? Mm-mm. I mean, I'm happy to offer ideas, but not under that umbrella. And it's also reminding me of one other thing, and then I want to get back to you being able to talk about your experience. When Wondery did a limited series on the Twin Flame universe, this cultic group, right? They finished with the limited run, and then I got calls. I didn't know it was happening. I didn't know it was being taped, and that's fine. And people who were in it were interviewed about their stories. And then when they heard what was going to be going live or what had already gone live, they were so upset because it did make them seem like they were desperate, like they were quote unquote losers, like they were going to be felons anyway. And so I got a call from them saying, we need an addendum. We need this additional piece that explains the how and the why, because otherwise it's victim blaming. And that's so unfair to do to people who've already been through the ringer. Like, please add insult to injury. Thanks a lot, right?
Yeah, that's how it felt.
Right. It's very hard.
Yeah. No, it is. And the Nexium story, which you brought up, that's the story that I got to know Sarah Edmondson very well and Mark Vicente, and we've all become friends and talked at length, and they've read my book extensively, and I've heard much about their stories and watched The Vow and listened to their podcasts and been on their, and I really learned so much about how my situation was. The easiest way to explain it is if I had only a few words to explain it, I just say it's like I was in a cult, but it was one-on-one, and then boom. That's how you would learn most about what happened. Is the same dynamics apply, the same psychological tactics, the same things, the qualities about me, which are generally good ones that make me a good target to a cult leader, are the same, exactly the same that made me a good target to this guy. And I learned a lot about some things that I was grappling with on the other side of this and trying to figure out. One of them being, I would get queasy anytime somebody would say to me like, oh, well, all that happened because you were blinded by love or you were in love with him. I'm like, no, he was gross and horrible and I was terrified of him. I wasn't in love with him. But in my own words and in my own memoir, in which I put a ton of actual dialogue between him and I that I've recovered, there's places where I would say, I love you to him. And I can admit, remembering that I sort of felt that way, but I couldn't really reconcile it because I didn't understand what that was. And it was something Mark Vicente said in a podcast. I think he's repeated it elsewhere. And then I've heard other people talk about this now as well. But it's these cult leaders, guru person that's trying to get you to get attached to them are, they're sort of taking your best qualities and mirroring them back to you. And then also having examined you thoroughly and understanding your biggest hopes and dreams and ambitions and everything you want for your life and dream of. And they sort of twist all of that up and present themselves as if they are the means to get there. It's very much like a guru. Like, I will be the one to give you enlightenment, or it's through me that you will achieve your dreams. And so it creates this attachment, and it's more of an attachment. It's not love, it's an attachment. And then that's what they end up exploiting. And so that was just one example of something that now I feel like, okay, now I understand that, whereas I was confused about it before.
Right. Oh, it's very interesting. And I think also going back to what you were saying before about how, trying to catch you laughing with him and that you were somehow in on it. What's so interesting about that is that that's something that women have had to deal with for millennia, right? That they must have wanted it.
Yeah, or also not understanding. I mean, that the call that they put at the end, I was like playing a role, and it was a 45-minute, like I was just trying to get him talking and as much as I possibly could on audio. And I had to even sort of dissociate, like, deliberately to be able to have that call, which I feel like I'm good at. I could talk to him and have a conversation without like freaking out and wanting to yell at him about what a monster he is and how could he do what he did to me. And it's like, I get it. It's like I'm talking to an alligator or a snake or an alien or a monster. Like, I get it. He's never going to understand. And so there's no desire on my part to get him. Nothing. To me, it was just, I'm just here strategically trying to get content for this film. And it's the fact that he doesn't know I'm recording him is my own little way, like a tiny way of getting back at him. So I'm just going to go along with this phone call. Yeah. And then, they used it to make me look bad, which is weird because in the beginning they show me recording him and they show me saying that I wouldn't do that to anybody else, but to this guy, F him. But by the end of it, I guess people forget that. But my point is that also I know that, very often, and I'm sure this comes up as it did in the, Diddy trial and whatnot, where they would pull up texts of the woman Cassie saying certain things. And what most people don't realize is, it's whatever you want to call it, fawning or whatever, it's self-protection, it's survival. It's like if you're dealing with a threat and somebody that makes you afraid, you're going to say what they want to hear. You're going to say whatever you have to say to keep them calm and not, whatever, to try to get out of the situation. So it's a matter of managing the situation. And so you will very often say all the things that they want to hear or do the things that they want you to do. That doesn't mean that we wanted to do them or that we are enjoying doing them at all. It's just a matter of survival. And I'm sure it's like in trials and hearings, and it's that stuff has been misunderstood and used to defend the perpetrators.
Yes, absolutely right. And there was an interesting thing that came out recently about the idea of Stockholm syndrome. This idea, right, that people fall in love with their captor. So that was completely wrong. The woman came forward and she said, I was never in love. This psychiatrist decided that I was in love with this person because I was focused on him. But I was focused on him just as you would be focused on a snake in the grass. You're going to watch where it's going because that's your source of danger. And I never felt for him. I didn't care for his plight. I just had to keep my eye on him, and I had to keep him happy with me.
Right, exactly. You're going to want to strategically, do whatever you can to get, maybe they'll have a bit of sympathy for me. Maybe they'll form an attachment to me and therefore be less likely to, pull the trigger or whatever the actual immediate threat is gonna be. So of course.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's just a survival. It's a manipulative tactic, but also it's scanning. You want to make sure you see where the danger is and where it's going and how to diffuse things if you can. Right. It's all strategic tactics. But of course, it was explained away like, oh, she fell in love with him.
Right, I know, which is so, I don't know, that's so typically sort of gross and reductive, and like they're trying to like sexualize the whole thing. I don't know. It's just, it seems kind of like some old man, psychologist probably made that observation. But what is actually interesting is the trauma bond, which is the actual sort of strange attachment, which I can see happened in my situation very much, where you end up feeling like you're dependent on this person, and they're the only ones who can protect you. And of course, they're the ones who got you into the situation in the first place. But it creates this bond, which is, complicated and icky, but you feel an attachment where it's like, wait, no, don't leave me, because I'm left in this situation and I need help to get out. And it just creates a weird psychological bond.
Oh, yeah. One other thing about that, and then I want to come back to sort of the beginning of a certain part of the story, and then we'll come back to where we were. When you have a trauma bond, sometimes that also comes from this intermittent gratification, which is very addictive. Like the person who I know I have to keep happy with me, who's difficult to please, I have to make sure that I'm going to do what I need to do or not do what I need to not do in order to make sure that I get that feedback from them that lets me know I'm safe. And so that is something where you can find a lot of people who have been through that or who are raised with parents like that find that when they go into a space, could be a party, could be anything, they feel like it is their job to keep the most difficult person in the room happy. And so they will focus in not on who they think is pleasant, who they want to hang out with, but just the one who's the most prickly or the one who's most mercurial. Like, they zero in to make sure that, again, the snake is not going to bite them. But it's an interesting thing because it's not necessary for you to keep replaying that, but a lot of people do it without realizing.
Yeah, and I think, having been through all this research and learning and analysis myself, I see it now even in more casual situations where somebody will, and usually it's a man doing it to a woman, but I'm sure it happens the other way around all the time. That's just my experience because I'm a woman. But where, I can see it that in all kinds of casual situations, because I'm not like dating, I'm not doing that thing. But sometimes men will dole out these compliments, but then they'll also do a bit of that sort of negging thing, and they'll give you like a little slight take you down, and then give you a compliment, and then take you down, give you a compliment. And it could be your looks, your intelligence, your accomplishments, whatever, your capabilities. And it's amazing how much you can now see that happening in real time once you understand it.
Right. As a therapist in this field too, and this is part of the reason that I don't call this podcast just something about cults, because it is about relationships. It's about the power differential across the board. And it could be politically, it could be anywhere, because you see it in so many places. But there are times that people will say, oh, I went on a first date with someone. Oh, he was so great. He was so charming. And you know what? I think he is right. I probably do talk too much. And it was like this little comment. And I thought, ooh, what happened? Like he made sure to make a comment about something to make you insecure, but you still think you had a good time and you're going to go out again. And so I will sometimes say, notice what you are left with feeling worried about that you weren't worried about to begin with, and that was purposefully done. Sometimes they'll listen, sometimes not, because the charm is sometimes so great. And that's what I want to ask you about. Sometimes people will say to me, I had a feeling from the beginning, but I ignored it, or I learned to ignore it, or I taught myself to ignore it so I could get the other things from, what this person said they were going to be able to provide for me. So first impressions, I always find fascinating. They're so telling. So what was your first impression of him?
Well, the thing that this guy did strategically, I believe, and, on smart, based on what his goals were, is that I met him on Twitter. And so all of our first getting to know each other was all digital and then eventually on the phone and whatever. But when you meet somebody in that way, it allows them to, they're curating what information you're getting. So, it's a very different thing if you're meeting somebody in a work environment where you get to know them over time and slowly and the chemistry builds, or you see them in some other environment, but work is one where people sometimes, but you get to see them, how they operate with other people and how other people respond to them. And, you're much more likely to get a genuine representation of who somebody is versus, just somebody telling you what they want you to hear and sending you the pictures they want you to see and making themselves look the way they want you to see them and all of that. And so, he did that, and it was like over a month before I first met him. And in my case, I certainly got weird feelings, and even after I first met him, thought, yeah, this isn't right at all. I won't see him again. But in my case, I realize I have never been good with boundaries. So it'd be very easy, and I can look back my whole life. I mean, this kind of thing happened over and over again where I just didn't have strong enough boundaries. And so people would be able to plow right through, or they don't even need to because I didn't know how to put them up. And they would be able to get back to me or get to me or, somehow reel me in some way. And so, yeah, he just kind of barreled through and kept coming back or found a reason to pull me back, again, which is very common. These people are really good at doing these things because they're reading you. They've learned all your insecurities, how to push your buttons, what things to say to reel you in. And, also on the other side of this, it's another layer that puts another context in my understanding of how all this happened is I ended up getting, I went through a whole extensive evaluation and got an autism 1 diagnosis, which is just another layer of being able to understand, how these things happened and what might have made me more vulnerable or susceptible than the average person, or maybe somebody who wouldn't have that diagnosis, even though, I think it's very common. It's not like I'm special for having it. I think it's more common than people realize, but it is something that, I think, especially with women who have the diagnosis, it just is another aspect. If I'd known earlier, if I'd understood earlier and other people in my life knew and understood, I would have been more wary of other people and of protecting myself.
Right. So coming from a family with people who are all over the spectrum of a lot of things, it is really interesting. And I used to be in education and worked with kids who had autism. I think more intensive versions, but still, a lot of people now are being diagnosed with autism 1, and it's really important to know what that means and what it doesn't mean also. It still means you're high functioning in kind of every way, but, and sometimes higher in a lot, like it can be a superpower. And what is also important about it is the social aspect. And I think also being a straight shooter, that we assume, right, that what's true for us is true for other people. So if we say what's true, right, why would we assume otherwise of these people who we're entrusting?
Right. I think that's why I feel really comfortable around other people who have these qualities. Is that's one of the things that's most reassuring, is that what you see is what you get. And there's this straightforwardness there. And so that's probably one of the things where it doesn't, I don't walk into a situation and if somebody tells me something, it's like it doesn't occur to me that they would be lying or misrepresenting them, because why would they do that? Because I wouldn't do that. It wouldn't occur to me to do that. So why would they do that? And so then you believe them, and then, and then you get into trouble. I think that diagnosis is also correlated with sometimes what's called being a highly sensitive person. It feels relevant and correlated. Getting like more easily overwhelmed than I think other people sometimes as well. Yeah, because these people very often will bombard you with information and contradictory stuff and create confusion and overwhelm you so that your critical thinking is that much more impaired and you're unable to see what's really happening or advocate for yourself.
Yes, right. Advocate for yourself. Very important piece here. And I think also that people who are more highly sensitive tend to be more conflict averse. So you don't say the things that you maybe needed to say. You don't set the boundary. You don't raise your voice if that's what's going to get the other person's attention. You don't have the argument with them. You go along, you avoid. And so then it's like sort of this fertile ground for people like him to come in, not saying that anything that you're doing, and I like your point, it's not like you're wrong, you're doing anything wrong, but that people will capitalize on those traits. And that's where the problem is, not with you in the least. So your first impression was curated, as you're saying. He could refine it. He could be careful about the tone and the language. So he came across fine. And then in person, what did you think about him?
Here's the problem with meeting somebody in this way is that now it's all muddled and confused because I'm trying to reconcile what I thought I knew about him with whatever sort of vibes I'm getting. And if all I was going on was the vibes, I would have probably, I mean, who knows? Sometimes these people can be very charming and magnetic. But I mean, and also there's the fact that this guy sent photos of himself and he looked much different in person. And over time, he changed the way he looked even more. It's kind of a whole crazy story. But there's a story in my book, too, of the first time he sent me a photo with his eyes and my having an initial reaction of fear, like an initial visceral reaction of fear because he had these big, brown, intense eyes. And, the reason I ended up chatting with him because he was talking, I had a friendship with Alec Baldwin. Alec had just joined Twitter. This guy and Alec followed each other. So there was that false validation there because I somehow thought that they must know each other. And so I started talking to him, even though there's no picture on his back then Twitter. And then eventually put like a mysterious photo of like the bottom half of his face only, with his 5 o'clock shadow. And he had a very nice mouth. And it was this very intriguing photo. And so he did this sort of slow reveal. And then later, and then a little time goes by and he's chatting with me and saying all this sort of cryptic, mysterious stuff, probably trying to get me hooked and lured. And then he sends me like a photo of himself, at the right angle with sunglasses on. And then it was a while before he sent me a photo where, I could see his eyes. And the first time I saw his eyes, I felt fear. And that should have been a huge screaming red flag. I would know now that even if I couldn't explain the reaction, just having that reaction is enough of a red flag to run away or, even if it seems irrational. And yeah, sometimes people talk about like sociopath eyes or that dark, intense stare. And it was just a photograph and I felt fear. And then, I just sort of overrode that, rationalized it and, just let it go. But yeah, imagine how my life would be different if I listened to that and backed away from him. But another thing I think he did very strategically is there was always so much mystery and, it created this intrigue and curiosity and like, ooh, who is he really? And like he implied he was this powerful person and then was sort of gently and more, implying that he would be able to help me with all of my issues and what I was going through. And so, yeah, I mean, he certainly knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yes. And it's interesting, too, that he just showed part of his face. I mean, it could be that he knew about his eyes, that he knew that he stared. I mean, there are these, sociopathic eyes. And you hear sociopaths now being interviewed. And they say they look at the eyes and they will sometimes tell there's a fellow sociopath because it's someone who doesn't blink as often, someone who is studying you like prey,
Yeah, not having a startle response is another one of those signs.
Oh, yeah.
And I've seen it happen sometimes where I'm shocked. Like I'm the other way around. Like it's embarrassing sometimes where just somebody says something loud or there's like a noise and but yeah, when you see somebody that is completely calm in a situation where, in response to something, a loud noise or something kind of alarming. That freaks me out.
That's interesting. That's sort of an amygdala issue where people, it takes much more to have that person really feel something or react to anything. They're so contained. Yeah, it's very different nervous system.
Yeah, which is why I think you're not going to see them meditating or really relaxing. I think they tend to want stimulation and excitement, and there's like a recklessness, and they just want that activity. And one of the things I noted, the very first book I read, I ended up reading a lot of different things, but the very first book I read that gave a lot of descriptions of Keith Raniere, the leader of NXIVM, there were so many things I noticed that he had in common, even though he was leading this whole cult, big group of people, and the guy in my story. And one of them just being that, according to this book, Keith was always like playing these video games a lot of the time in his downtime. And this guy was always, in my story, he kind of always had to be like playing Call of Duty or something like that, as if he couldn't just chill just the way that most people can and need to.
Right. He needed the dopamine rush, the challenge.
Yeah.
What would give other people a stomach ache and say, okay, I'm done with this. I'm tired of being killed on this game. Like, But for them, yeah, I think it's exciting, or it's just their baseline, which is so different.
Yeah. And I think also they're able to, all of the stuff that they have to do to be, for example, like there's the stories about like the sociopaths and manipulators that have like 3 different wives and families and lives and things going on, and they have to keep track of all the lies and like stuff that would exhaust anybody else. Like having to remember your lies and stories, and like normal people would just be completely stressed out and exhausted, and they're just not, and they have this capacity to, not only a capacity to handle that, but probably like they just get off on it.
Yeah, I was one time telling someone when they were asking me about how would I define a cult leader, and among the things, I don't know, every once in a while an idea just sort of comes out, and I said, and they don't have wrinkles, and they said, what? And I said, they are not bothered by the same things that we are bothered by. They're not stressed. They go about their day as though nothing really is happening that's of any kind of consequence. They don't feel guilt. They don't feel remorse. They don't look back to see what they've done wrong. They're in different tenses. They're like in present and future. And the people, they leave wreckage. Like they're this tornado that comes through, and people are just strewn about, but they've moved on.
And I think too, yeah, and I think that helps them that allows them to get up and lie. And in situations where normal people, again, would be so nervous, especially not just one-on-one, but like to, I don't know, on a world stage or to a large group of people, or to walk in and be impersonating. I mean, it's why con artists who are really good at what they do, who are, maybe acting with somebody's stolen identity, or they're going to walk. I mean, in my case, we strolled into this bank and he's pretending that he's going to have all this money, but he's not nervous at all. And therefore he's not exhibiting any of, I think if I walked in and I had to pretend to be somebody in a situation, I'd be nervous. You'd see it on my face. Like little things would be happening where people would somehow go, she seems like she's full of shit, right? Because I wouldn't be very good at it. Whereas these people are able to walk in completely relaxed, basically what would probably allow them to pass a lie detector test, right? Because all those things, those chemical reactions aren't going to be happening in their body. Any one of us would be freaked out about lying, but they would be completely normal and fine with it, So it's like they get away with their lies and we believe them it's just confusing because they seem to be telling the truth, and it appears that they're telling the truth. So you go, okay, I guess they must be telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they're not.
Right. Of course they're not. Right. I told a story once on this podcast, actually, that, but just very briefly, I was a school counselor for many years. at a particular school, and the principal came on the loudspeaker and said, "Can I see Rachel Bernstein in my office, please?" I broke out into a sweat. I thought, "Oh my god, what did I do?" It's like suddenly having a police car behind you. What did I do wrong? And then I actually had to stop myself and say, "Wait, I work here. She probably needs help with something." But I had such a reaction to it because, yes, I'm also a reactor and have a sense of wanting to do right,
Yep.
you know?
And not wanting to get in trouble.
Right. It matters.
Yeah, I have that too. I mean, I have like I have email fear, I have phone call fear, doing something wrong fear.
Yeah,
Yeah, all of that.
right? So to go back to this first impression where you're saying, I should have, there's so many should haves, right, in these stories. I should have paid attention to my fear when I saw his eyes. But then you justify it. Then you feel like it's wrong of you, probably, to think, oh, I don't want to judge someone so quickly, so offhand. I'll sometimes tell people if they're about to embark on something or they're getting involved in something, and if something rubs them the wrong way, it could be an event, it could be a person, to make a note before you explain it away, before you justify it, before you blame yourself or criticize yourself for having the thought, keep a record of it. Because very often you come back to that.
What's difficult about these situations is, unfortunately, we learn the lessons when we didn't pay attention to the thing, or we overrode the thing. And then later it's like, I remember I had that feeling about this thing, or when he said this thing, or when I saw his eyes. But less often, it's more, if you say I had paid attention to that and went, okay, something about his eyes scared me, I'm going to pay attention to it, I'm going to delete, block him, never talk to him ever again, and I never hear from him again, I wouldn't have ever gotten the validation that, oh, that guy's a sociopath, and wow, did I dodge a bullet. In all likelihood, you're not going to get that. Occasionally you do, because it happened to me once where I walked away from a potential business partnership because I had seen this person behaving in ways that was like, it kind of seems like he's kind of an asshole, even though he acted really nice to me. And then later on, I just happened to have met somebody who had worked with him who said, oh, that guy's a huge asshole. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, but in most cases, you don't get that validation. So it's hard to convince ourselves to, you're just going to second guess yourself and go, yeah, but there's all these things on paper that seem, it's like if you were hiring somebody, or I don't know, in any situation, you're like, yeah, but there's this, and this that makes me think logically I ought to take this job or go with this person or hire this person or go on a second date or work with this person. And so, you're being asked to do the thing that seems irrational because it's just based on a gut feeling, and it's just unfortunate that usually we don't get that validation of, I'm sure I can think of things where I think, yeah, I'm probably a lot better at dodging these bullets, but who knows?
Right. And sometimes people who are narcissistic, who are sociopathic, will surround themselves with the yes people, the ones who affirm and confirm. Same thing within a cult. The inner circle are the people who are going to vouch for the leader. So you not only don't get confirmation, you get, if you get any confirmation at all, it's that you're wrong. And it is wrong of you to feel that way. So I know we're sort of skipping over this swath of things that have been covered, but there are a lot of places, and we'll get to that, where people can hear the story. I'm so curious, just in the essence of time, where it's sort of a midway point, to get to the after effects, the what you needed to be able to either understand what you needed emotionally, what sort of support, what needed to be clarified, like the ideas of betrayal trauma and trauma bond. I think also moral injury, right? If you feel like through your alliance with this person, you've hurt other people. There's so much to grapple with after. So let's get into that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very difficult part of it. And the other, one of the other qualities that I admire and I identify with in people who will get like an autism 1 diagnosis is this very strong sense of justice. And so, it makes what happened even more painful because I feel like all these other people who are hurt and people who lost their jobs because of the way my business imploded and, investors and people that lost money and it all feels like it's my fault. And so, of course, I feel obligated to make good on it eventually, however I can. And I mean, part of the reason why I'm out with my book and I'm talking about these things and I am working on another docuseries is I just know on the other side, when I first came out of this and was reeling from what happened and being so confused, the isolation is so painful because nobody understands, or it feels like nobody understands. I didn't walk out of my situation and into the arms of, like Sarah and like the Nexium survivors who know what this is like, or talking to these, the right people and psychologists who understood it. Now there's much more conversation about narcissistic abuse and there's more conversation about cults, and it's a much different context now than when it was 2016 when I was arrested and facing criminal charges. And the court system, I mean, they certainly had no context for what happened to me. And that's so incredibly isolating. And really, you're just like marinating in shame every waking hour. And getting asked really painful questions. So that part of it was really, really difficult. And, I also counsel people that unfortunately, what I understand now that I didn't understand at the time is that whatever it is about me that allowed this to happen, and it happened to me multiple times, because even before this story that became, a tabloid story and because of who was involved, and then it turned into like this big hit Netflix show. Even before all of that, I was involved with somebody who very demonstrably completely lacks empathy and got a huge amount of money out of me. And it was a crazy dramatic relationship. And there was a bit of tabloid stories around that one as well. But, and then I step into it again, but so much worse. And I think I came out of it thinking like, all right, well, I've got nothing but lots of debt on me and it's a public story and everybody knows that. I have nothing to take. What could somebody take from me? So my defenses were down, and I stepped into a situation again where somebody like turned everything upside down. And that, I mean, when I realized what was happening, then I had this moment where I actually think when it sort of hit me what was happening, I went, oh my God, yet again, like somebody turns out to be not who I thought they were. And they came into my life saying, oh, I can help you. I can help you with all this stuff. And oh, poor you. I understand what you went through. Blah, 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 blah. No, turns out they're like a complete, like destructive psycho. And I thought like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. How could I have stepped into something like this again? And I think I actually went like, looked up. I get it now. Like I had this feeling that somehow there's some, I mean, again, I don't know. This part was just confusing because there was a whole like weird spiritual aspect to what this guy did to me in a very culty way. But I just had this feeling that somewhere somebody had gone, she doesn't really understand it yet. She's going to need another lesson. We're going to have to give her another lesson. And so I got smacked again. So for whatever reason, I've had to go through this a bunch of times and get a very, very, very thorough ongoing life lesson about, manipulation and different disordered psychologies. And also, what is it about me? It's a very fine line between, it's not victim blaming, but it's acknowledging that there are qualities about me that make me a good target. And I always tell other people, like, these are generally, when I'm counseling, because people come to me all the time in DMs with their own stories, or they're like reeling from having just gotten out of a situation, and I always, or they're in that, they're blaming themselves and they feel stupid. And, again, which is part of why I wrote my book. It's like, no, here's my story. Like, I don't want all of us to have to feel stupid on top of everything else. But I always tell people that, now is the time to be more careful than ever. And because these qualities, which happen to be good qualities, like having a sense of idealism and trusting and seeing the good in people and wanting to help, and those qualities make you more susceptible, and that doesn't go away. So now you need to be like very, very, very careful going forward, because it can happen again and again. And I mean, I'm not a professional in this area. I just happen to be exposed to a lot of people's stories now. And a lot of people who come to me tell me that, it's happened to them multiple times as it did to me. So
Yeah, and that's been my experience with the 1,000 or so people I've worked with who have been through situations like this. Rarely is it just one experience. And sometimes also the next experience you think is going to heal you from the previous experience. So you're just noticing what's different and what you're getting that feels qualitatively different or gentler or something or more spiritual. But you might not be noticing all the other parts that are the dangerous parts, that are the similar parts. And right, you don't have to change something about yourself or think there's something wrong with you, but it is good to notice that other people are going to zero in, or that you're going to give over too much power to someone else and too much trust, assuming again that what's true for you is true for other people. And you don't want to have to change, I think, a worldview to be negative and to be suspicious of everyone, because that would just be a drag. And what kind of a world would that be to live in if you assumed that? But it is good to notice sometimes the signs or just a feeling like, ooh, this is feeling similar.
Yeah. And I mean, now I'm very careful with anything that could possibly expose me in some way. And at this point, I've been exposed as much as one can possibly be exposed. So it's not like there's some information that somebody would find out about me, but just being careful about how open you are with other people. For me, it's different because my story's known. I'm a very public person, but say somebody's out in the dating pool and they're meeting other people, it's like sometimes what can seem like somebody's taking a really great interest in you, and that's really flattering and it's really affirming. And now I think I look at something like that and I would immediately think like, are they data mining? Are they gathering all the information about my hopes and dreams and my biggest fears because they're going to use it against me? It's not cynical. It's just cautious.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like asking, why do they want to know this? Like I could answer the question, but for what purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. It's a different way of kind of slowing things down and finding out more before you give over your information, because it should be based on merit that you offer private things or that you offer your trust, right? It should be based on what a person has proven to you about themselves and what questions they're willing to answer. Being conflict averse means that sometimes you're not going to ask the questions that you think are going to make someone upset.
Yes. Oh my God. That's something I struggle with all the time, is like, if you're suspicious about something, you don't want to ask difficult questions because you think like, well, what if I'm insulting them, or yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. But sometimes, and sometimes that's the way you find out about a person, by asking the question, seeing how they respond to it. Do they respond the way you would, where you'd say, oh, sure, I'll let you know, not a big deal. Or do they get the how dare yous? It's an interesting thing, but you might not know unless you try, which is nerve-wracking in some situations. But it's a really good thing to be able to see in yourself that you're willing to take that risk for your safety, I'm wondering also about this idea of being challenged, because, sometimes people will make you think that you are supposed to be challenged in the way that they want to challenge you, and that you're going to accept the test. And then you feel like you're achieving something, but you're really not achieving something in real life. You're achieving kind of getting their approval. And there are all these like yes steps, like the mini tests, and it gets bigger and bigger Was that part of the relationship?
Yeah, that pretty much defines the relationship.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
he and again, this is why I mean, I I am so thankful that I was able to recover as much of my communications with him as I did, because on the other side of this, he had deleted all of our emails. He had taken my phone, so I didn't have our text messages. And, that stuff is absolutely crucial for whatever, a legal situation or whatever. But even if nothing else, just for your own understanding on the other side of it, or to validate what happened. But I ended up recovering a bunch of our G chats, which are kind of like texts. It was sort of like chatting through Gmail back in the day. I can see now, and I put this stuff in the book, where he crafted this whole diabolical scenario where it was as if I was deliberately being tested and I had to pass all of these tests. But I could see when I was resisting doing what he was telling me to do, he would be like, "Oh, so you're giving up?" And knowing that I'm one of those people, that I'm very stubborn and I'm very determined and I won't give up and I'll keep going and I don't want to be a failure or a quitter. And so, he would say things like, "Oh, you're giving up," or he'd say, "Maybe you're not the person I thought you were," meaning maybe I'm not the special sort of chosen one that's meant to be doing all of the world changing things that I wanted to do. Maybe I'm not that person. Maybe I'm just nobody. And it's just very blatant manipulation. I don't know what to call it. Is it validating? Is it grotesque? Does it make me want to throw up everywhere? I can just see it in print, which is why I put a lot of that in my book. So it's like you can see his words and the way he's manipulating me and the things that he's saying, and sometimes telling me, "Read this over and over again, like drill this into your mind." Or, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of ways that he was obviously manipulative, but that sort of putting me through these tests and challenges and making it so like I have to prove myself, and then praising me like, "Oh, I did good," "Oh, I just wired him $50,000. Like, oh, you did a good job. You were strong. You did it. I believed in you. I knew you could do it." Like, what?
Yeah. That's, I think, part of the studying of a person, that they find out what their buttons are that they can push. And it is true that so many people, like when they come out of these sorts of relationships or cult groups or large group awareness trainings, they'll say, "Well, I acted outside my integrity and I'm not really an honest person and I don't follow through." But they are, and they do. But these were the buttons. And the person knew that this would be the thing that would be used for behavior modification to make sure people were going to do what they wanted, because you don't want to be called all these other things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like they figure out, or, they're very skilled at whatever they're doing. It's like they're bypassing your critical thinking and tapping right into your subconscious emotional needs and wounds from your childhood and they're like tapping straight into that. And that like allows them to kind of direct your behavior and get you to do what they want to do, kind of bypassing your critical thinking, on top of, keeping you in a state of confusion and overwhelmed and exhausted, and all of, those are just ways that assist in them getting you to do what they want you to do.
Right, right. So to talk about that, because I was going to ask about you physiologically when you left, because there is an exhaustion and it can take over and you can feel it in so many ways. And sometimes it becomes hard even to suddenly come from having been in something so intensive to not being in it at all. And it's like falling off a cliff. Like, what do you do with it? Can you rest? Can you take time for yourself? Or is that selfish? Or, all of the things. So tell me about when you were coming out of this situation, how it was for you physically or physiologically, and what helped you.
I mean, again, it's easier. Like, I understand a lot more about it now, but I mean, I would get completely overwhelmed by tiny decisions and small things. Like somehow it's as if, there was some kind of life earthquake level tragedy, I'd be able to kind of handle it. But it was somehow like the little tiny challenges, like having to navigate, because I came out of this with nothing. My stuff, everything was gone. I had to kind of start from scratch, and I'm facing criminal charges and jail time, and I've got nothing. And so even just the process of like figuring out, okay, well, how am I going to can I get like Medicaid, how am I going to get health insurance? And like, I need a new driver's license, or all these little things that, would like, one time my dad came to visit and he needed to go somewhere. So he just said, here, can you park my car? I got to go to this thing. And I remember sitting in his car, and I'm like sitting in my dad's Prius in the pouring rain up in Harlem, like trying to find a parking space, bawling my eyes out because I just couldn't. For some reason, it was like, this is too much. I can't handle this. All I had to do was just park his car somewhere. But I remember sobbing because I just couldn't handle it. And then it's good to be aware that people might say something or the wrong thing and they don't know what they're doing, but they're basically triggering something, and you might have an explosive reaction of rage because they're triggering something that this other person did, that is tapping into your rage over what happened. Again, I'm one of those people that I'm not normally somebody that screams and yells and has a tantrum at all. I'm the opposite. I've spent my whole life being the good girl and not yelling and standing up for myself and getting angry. But there are times where, somebody would say something, or, I would feel cornered or whatever. And I just absolutely lashed out and like screamed in ways that I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And I've since learned that that's a very typical sort of like post-traumatic reaction, is that you can get very, very, very reactive. Knowing all of this now, I was kind of thrown out of that situation into another sort of survival situation because I'm facing criminal charges now, and I have to like find a way to earn money, and dealing with, nobody understanding and the tabloids, and trying to understand what happened and get my life back together. And yeah, it was a lot. Ideally we could come out of these situations and be taken care of and nurtured and have time, but rarely is that the case. There were no children involved in my situation, thankfully, but I know this happens to a lot of people with kids, and you're just you're in survival mode, but on the other side of this and trying to get away from the person. And it can be really, really difficult. And I hope that what I'm doing and talking about my story can really help educate a lot of people who are around people who've been through this sort of a thing, for them to be more understanding. And also, people contact me a lot where they're trying to get somebody out of a situation like this, which, as you know, is so incredibly thorny and difficult. And the more people understand these types of situations, the better they could do the right things to try to help somebody getting out versus do the wrong things, which can very often seem like the right thing, but it backfires and, only gets them more entrenched.
Right. And I think to add to this mix, like there's not enough already going on, you don't necessarily know what happened to you.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if you don't understand it, because who does, right? Like people, I wish this were curriculum in schools. It should be.
Yeah.
Right. People should know the language of this, of, betrayal and trauma and coercion and all of it. But instead, you learn math.
And Darvo, which is such a common thing. And
right.
sort of a narcissistic situation, your more typical narcissistic situation is if you point out that somebody did something hurtful or something they said was hurtful, and then their immediate reaction is, how dare you say that I would do that? I can't believe you said that. I'm so insulted. Boom. That's Darvo. And that's a huge, not just a red flag. That person is, that's not good. Because a normal, healthy reaction would be, even if it was a complete misunderstanding, would be like, oh my God, that's not what I meant. Or wait a minute, let me understand this. What happened? What I said made you feel that way? Let me understand. Let's explore this, not immediate, like turning around to make themselves the victim.
Oh, yeah, right? And then you end up needing to take care of them or apologize?
Right. Or they're doing it to an audience, like in family court. They're making themselves the victim and they're, Your Honor, she did this. And,
Mhm.
or they will very often provoke the target. So this is very common. They'll provoke you. They will provoke you, push your buttons, push your buttons, push your buttons. And then you lose your temper and scream and get mad. And then meanwhile, they're like recording you. And then they like, look at you, you're crazy. You're freaking out. Oh my God, what's your problem? And then they tell you that you have the problems when they're the ones who created it.
There was this ad I posted on Facebook that was 1950s. A woman is standing in her kitchen with a dress on with heels. She has kids all around her asking for this, needing that. She has a dish towel over her shoulder and she's in the middle of needing to do dishes and she has a mop hand, so she's going to be doing all this housework. And it's an ad for a sedative. When you need a little extra help with your day, here, take this, as opposed to, could someone come in and help her for a second, right? Or not have taken away her job so that she's home 24/7, but no, here, take this thing. So I think people, we get a lot of messages about, things that handling things in kind of the opposite way that they should be. But I wonder also, when you were talking about feeling like you hurt people along the way, which is devastating, right? Beyond. I mean, devastating is even sort of a temperate word for it. I liken it to if someone is in their car and you're in a car and there's a car in front of you and they purposely ram into the back of your car, it makes your car lurch forward and you hit the person in front of you. They, though, leave the scene of the crime and you're left with this person turning on you. How dare you do this to me? And you do feel bad because they seem injured, but you didn't. Is it your fault? I mean, you want to take responsibility, say, I'm sorry, but it's not your fault. But where'd the person go whose fault it is, right? And it's like it happens so often that this is the case,
Yeah, that's interesting because I use an example sometimes of, it's a very similar example. It's like if I was driving the car and, the guy was next to me and he was like, hey, look at this. And I'm like, no, I'm driving. No, look at this. And then I look, and because I looked, I caused an accident and then all these people are harmed and it's my fault and I feel responsible. But he told me to look and I didn't want to, but I did and I shouldn't have. So it is my fault, but is it my fault? Because he knowingly made me, it's complicated, but it's painful. And, if I had the amount of times I've heard people or read and, comments on YouTube comments and places where I don't know, done interviews or any place where somebody can leave a comment, the number of times people have written things like, oh, she's not taking responsibility. I've never heard you take responsibility. And then, I mean, in response to Bad Vegan, which the title itself was terrible, as if I made that show and edited it. You know what I mean? I sat for 2 interviews that were like 10 hours long. The fact that there was no footage of me saying how deeply sorry I am for the harm caused, that's not me. I'm sure I said that somewhere along the way. But getting bombarded by this, in your example, if somebody hit me from behind and now I cause this pile up and people are hurt and everybody's yelling at me, oh my God, you're not expressing remorse and you're not taking responsibility. And it's like, A, I am, but B, like, ow, it's just making me feel so much worse. Like if they only knew how terrible it feels. And again, these are just random people out there who don't understand what happened. And so it's easy to say, don't pay attention to it, but it's kind of hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard not to. No, yes, absolutely right. And I think also that the public goes for low-hanging fruit in general. Like, so you're here and you're sort of the figurehead of this, I guess, to a certain degree. So they're going to attack you. Similar to something I talk about on the podcast and I've done videos about, asking people the question, well, why did you stay? I would have known to leave, even though people love to posture that they would have done this differently. Chances are they wouldn't have, but they will say, why did you stay? And I feel like it's the wrong, I mean, first of all, you're asking the wrong person to defend themselves here in their behavior. The focus should be on the person who started this whole cascade of events. But they don't usually stick around. They're not willing to take responsibility. They're not going to do an interview very often,
No, well, and they feel no shame, and they're never going to, and they're not capable of it. And so it's almost as if, they come in and create this giant destructive tornado, and then they go off to have their tornado hit some other person, and you're left awash in all the shame and responsibility and the blame. And they're on to their next target, which, is very much the case in my situation, because this guy wasn't even criminally prosecuted for what he did to me. And, he's doing what he did to me to somebody else. And, it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And it's maddening that I keep thinking now, all of a sudden, I wish the judge in my story, and the prosecutor is another story. I think she also lacks empathy, but that's a whole other story and tangent. But anybody kind of involved with my case and the prosecution, and the judge in particular, who at least said in my sentencing that it seemed clear that I tried to run my business in good faith, meaning he could tell that I was a good person and I was trying to do the right thing, and just a lot of messed up stuff happened. Therefore, he sentenced me to jail time. But part of me wishes that some of those people would read my book and potentially go, oh, wow, is this different than, and by the way, I can't believe we let that guy go, and that and now he's doing the same thing to other people. And hopefully the details of my story would maybe help. I mean, I just think judges and people in the family courts and criminal justice system, they should all be required to study this stuff, because this is where that stuff shows up, is in these horrible custody battles where one of them's like this malignant narcissist manipulating everybody in the system, and they're trying to turn everything around. And if the people involved, and the judges and the attorney, if they don't understand these dynamics, they're going to be duped by these perpetrators too. And if nothing, and they're going to let them get off and go out there and do it to other people, because they're never, these people find a way to not be held accountable. That's unfortunately what happens a lot too.
Right. And they hone their skills, case by case. And also, I think the message, and this is something for judges, for attorneys to really know, that if they're not looking at the right person, and if they are not sort of punishing the right person here, then that person gets the message that they can get away with this. It emboldens them. Then it creates more of a monster, I think. And right, they feel impervious and like they're Teflon, and
they're just physically out there able to do it, as opposed to, this guy, there's no rehabilitation, nothing. He's never going to like suddenly change. And he's out doing this. I mean, some people get it. The detective who arrested me, we were found in Tennessee. I write about him extensively in the beginning of my book, because he saw it. Some people have seen this stuff enough times where they recognize, and it's happened to me where I've looked at situations and I think, oh, wait, I see what's going on here. That person's in control. This person's under their control. And the detective who arrested me saw it. He saw it, and he knew. And he knew from the way that the guy responded to being arrested, and then the way, because we were in separate rooms, and the way I responded, and the whole dynamic of the whole thing. And he was probably, from having seen situations like this before, he was like, oh, I see what's going on here. But, he was in Tennessee. I was extradited to New York, and then I was prosecuted in New York, and they certainly didn't get it at all.
I mean, that's a crime in and of itself. I know we're running out of time, which is unfortunate, because it's been great talking to you. But I want, I guess, people to hear from you, from your takeaways, really what to watch out for. I know we talked about sort of first impression, really recording it and sort of keeping track of it before you explain it away. Is there anything else, or just about how your body reacted to certain situations that now you notice, or something that can help people alert themselves to the potential for danger in a situation?
Yeah. I mean, well, one of the classic ones is just, somebody moving really fast, but so much of it comes down to your gut feelings, but also just moving really cautiously and slowly and deliberately. And also, the more when you meet somebody under any kind of mysterious circumstances, that's kind of a huge red flag. And that's why I always say, it's too bad that people are so online nowadays, and that people aren't meeting other people in the context of work. And the more other people, the more you meet all the other people in somebody's lives, and they have friends that they've had since childhood, or you see their relationships with their families and what's going on. And the more of that other information that you can get about somebody that's not controlled by that person, the better. And then, I mean, now we're talking farther down the line, but whenever anybody's in a situation like this, I always tell them that gather as much information as you possibly can. Save, back up all your texts, like make copies, hide them somewhere, get as much information as you possibly can, record them if you have to. I think there's even situations where now they're starting to, in some cases, override, because in some states it's illegal to record. There's two-party states and one-party states in some states. So like when I recorded this guy for the film, I was living in Massachusetts at the time. I had to come back to New York because it's legal in New York to record somebody without the other person knowing. But in some states, it's not legal. And I think they're starting to examine that, in cases of like spousal abuse or whatever, if say I was in a state where it's not legal, but I recorded my abusive boyfriend or whatever shouting at me and doing whatever, that can then, that can be illegal. And I mean, maddeningly, there are cases where women have been prosecuted for having made those recordings, because actually doing that and making the recording is itself an illegal act. And it's like, who are these people that would prosecute that person? It's crazy, but it happens. I mean, a lot of maddening stuff happens. So sadly, a lot of us need to learn to protect ourselves better. And I think also, after what I've been through, understanding that, if you have some of these tendencies where you tend to give people the benefit of the doubt, and maybe you're highly sensitive, you check the boxes that you would be called an empath. All of these things make us better targets. And it's just good to know that, and kind of feeling every situation and interaction, just understanding that helps.
Mm-hmm. Does really help. And then tell people about your book, and then we'll sign up.
Yeah, my book is called The Girl with the Duck Tattoo, and it's I have made a website for it, so it's just the title, thegirlwiththeducktattoo.com. And I'm most active on Instagram, just my name at Sarma Melngailis, and easy to find because my name is weird. I post about it there. I made a website for the book so you can get it. There's various links how to get copies, whether a signed copy from me or Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatnot. And I'm so grateful when people read my book and interact with me about it. I love when people send me pictures or screenshots of some paragraph or some line that really resonated to them or helped them understand something. It makes me feel good. Or even parts that made them laugh out loud, because there's some dark humor in there too, or just places that were, things that were funny that breaks up the tension.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, we will also put it in the show notes, and people will be able to get that information. And I'm glad that you had a chance, or that you created the chance for you to get your true story out. And that's really nice, really important, actually.
Yeah, no, it's very painful to go through something like this and then have somebody else twist around the story. And I published my book, so that this is the record and it's all verifiable. And this is what I wanted that original docuseries to be. Is I wanted it to be useful. I wanted it to be honest and useful. I wanted it to help people. And I think that at least that show, for some people who've been through stuff like this, made them feel a bit less alone. But I think the book really goes so much farther. And I'm continuing to write more, and I write on Substack now, and I want to keep writing about these topics.
Great. Great. Oh, so good to talk to you. Come back anytime. And I wish you well and healing, and that you get the support you need and deserve from here on in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and I'm grateful to be on.
One more thing before you go. Thank you to Sarma. I think that this is not an easy thing to talk about. Of course, this is something that is very revealing about a time in someone's life where I'm sure they wish they could take it all, most of it, probably all of it back. And it is not something that can be erased. And especially if it's something that was so public, it becomes something that for a period of time defines you in the public eye until you do something else in your life that is good, that's healing, that lets people know you've learned from the past, but also that helps people kind of shift the focus away from you to the person who set you up in this way, the person who got under your skin, the person who was really the puppet master. It is not to take responsibility away from women who are involved in scenes like this, but I do want you, as sort of the general public, to notice how often the blame will shift all too quickly to the women in the story, to the people who are seen as willing participants when they may have been unwitting participants, to the people who really were being manipulated and coerced, to the people who were so caught up in something in a web, really, that was not spun by them, but that they were entangled in emotionally, financially, and to be able to have an understanding of the misogyny built into that. I like how she is saying, I'm basically going to take responsibility for the things that were my responsibility, which I think is lovely to say. What's also true usually is that the person who is very much in charge, the person at the top of this power pyramid, doesn't say those things, doesn't say, I am going to take responsibility for the parts of this that were my fault, in fact, most of it. I'm going to take responsibility for the fact that I have a personality that causes people to act against their conscience or against their free will at times. I have a personality where I can intimidate people into doing things, and so I need to really watch that, and I need to stop interacting with people in this way, and I really need to get help. It would be lovely. It would be a much safer world if the people who were at the helm, the captains of these ships, really did do that and had those moments of reckoning and being able to see again their part and being able to acknowledge it and apologize and change and really want insight. But often it is the next tier of people who are the ones who go to jail and the ones who have kind of egg on their face, the ones who are interviewed for different shows, the ones who are open to talking about what they did and how it happened to them. And so I just want you to be aware of how often the blame shifts away, and sometimes only to the others in the story, the second tier people in the story. What I think is also important is that there is not only the idea of betrayal trauma, of really trusting someone who you may have been very enticed by, someone who was very exciting to you, who really had no interest or ability to be able to be a good friend and a true business partner, or be able to have truth at all about anything that they did. And so you can feel outraged and betrayed because you would have reason to feel both. But it is also true that people who have a conscience are left with moral injury. They're left walking around being wounded by the wounding that they caused. Because there is a sense, in a lot of cases, maybe not all, but in a lot of cases, that they wouldn't have done these things to other people had they not been caught up in this very sticky web. And the web consists of control and intimidation, of lies, of enticements, of things that may have been beyond their control to resist for whatever reason or reasons. Or by the time they were ready to resist, they may have been warned that they were too far in to back out now, without it being more dangerous to them, which often happens. So I appreciate Sarma being able to come on and talk and share and being able to be open. I hope that she heals. I hope that those who were impacted by her, by anyone else involved in this really despicable scene, are able to heal, are able to watch themselves in the future, are able to notice the warning signs, are able to see how to navigate the next business deals that they get involved in, and the next people they listen to, and the next people they find charming, and the next people they trust. Thank you so much again to her for coming on and being open with us. And I hope you all take care out there. Talk to you next week.
Thank you very much for listening. Please support IndoctriNation on Patreon at patreon.com/indoctrination. Be sure to give us a follow on our social media. Find us on Facebook and Instagram using @IndoctriNation Podcast. And for Twitter, find us at @_indoctrination. We love hearing from you too. So send us an email at indoctrinationshow@gmail.com. And for more updates on the show, visit our website at www.podpage.com/indoctrination.